journey together began here, at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County. We come from different schools, different backgrounds, and different religions, but we know that we are the last generation to get to meet Holocaust survivors, and it's our responsibility to keep these stories alive.
It was a Sunday morning, and most kids our age were probably still asleep or scrolling on social media, but we were here, together with our parents, 2 generations committed to making sure we never forget. This wasn't just history in a book, these were names, faces, and photographs of real people, real places, real lives that were torn apart, real nightmares.
And so many of these camps were just forced labor camps. They worked them to death and then they send them to the death camps.
In school sometimes we just learn about what happened during the Holocaust, not really the before and after. So I was kind of hoping to learn about the causes of the Holocaust, how people let this happen.
School, I really am interested in understanding and feeling like I could be there for those who aren't with us anymore, but continue their legacy and help other people also get educated and tell their stories.
As we moved through the exhibits, we were surrounded by images of horror and loss. Every artifact told a story. Every photo showed a real person's life.
This was only 80 years ago, it was so recent, and it's just so important to keep all these legacies alive.
I love being Jewish, and I love learning about other cultures, learning more about my culture, and what happened in the past that makes us stronger today.
Being here prepared us for meeting our Holocaust survivors. Ada, Walter, and Zelda are among the last people who can tell these stories from their own lives. We will learn more about what they went through and hear their stories, their personal stories of loss and courage, and how they rebuilt their lives after so much was taken from them. We know how rare this opportunity is. There will come a day when these survivors who lived through the Holocaust won't be here to share their story. That's why we are listening now, to help carry their voices forward and make sure they are never forgotten. We want future generations to know what happened and to understand when hatred isn't stopped.
Everyone would have come to America if they could in the 1940s, but one, you needed a lot of money, you needed papers, and the US government didn't really want a lot of refugees coming in.
Our next step was to learn about 3 participating Holocaust survivors. We will get to know them on a personal level by spending quality time with them, interviewing them, and learning about their story of survival. We were divided into 3 groups this evening. One group is focused on each survivor. Each group receives background information and bios, including where each survivor was born, details about their families and their lives. My group is learning about Zelda Polofsky. She's from Poland, near the city of Vilna. In 1939, Zelda's family lost everything under Soviet rule, and 2 years later, the Nazis invaded.
I'm most interested in learning about some challenges that she faced in the U.S.
Another group is learning about Ada Gracin, who was also born in Poland. Ada and her parents fled their hometown to escape when World War II began in 1939.
I'm excited to hear her story, but not even necessarily during the Holocaust, but also her childhood and about her kids and just not just bad parts, but also good parts of her life for her to share.
Also grateful that I'm just gonna be able to be the one that she gets to speak to, because maybe she hasn't been able to vent as much as she has wanted to in her whole life. So just it's feel good to be somebody she could speak to.
Our third survivor is Walter Kleinmann, whose parents left Germany in the 1930s due to the rise of Nazi power and growing anti-Semitism. Walter was born in an Italian internment camp in Potenza, Italy in 1941. He lived there with his parents in a unique, free confinement zone where Walter and his family had no civil liberties until the war ended.
I was wondering how being at the internment camp affected his education. I know he was at a Catholic school until 2nd grade, but how was he still able to get an education throughout high school?
Next week, we will meet Ada, Zelda, and Walter for the first time. Getting together beforehand is a great way for us to get to know them, and they also get to learn a bit about us.
Raise your hand if you have witnessed anti-Semitism in your lives.
That was the first question we heard as we walked into a room where the survivors were seated. Almost every hand around me went up. We knew that anti-Semitism didn't start and didn't end with the Holocaust. We turned our attention to Ada, Zelda, and Walter.
The war started in 1939, and we fell under the Russian occupation.
We each brought something from home, a photo, a necklace, a small object that means something personal to us.
So this was my great-grandma's from when she went to Israel, and it says Zion in it in Hebrew.
Oh, I thank you to God for my survival. I became a Hebrew school teacher, and this is my license certificate, teaching certificate.
So this was taken in Tito some 83 years ago.
We shared stories about our items, where they came from, and why they mattered. The survivors listened so closely, looking directly into our eyes, nodding, taking it all in. By the time we finished, the room felt different. We all knew each other a little better and felt connected. The survivors got a glimpse into our lives, and we got a better sense of who they are, not just as victims, but as individuals who thrived and had wonderful families and lived before and after the war.
And at the end of the meeting, we took a moment to celebrate Ada's birthday. She just recently lost her brother Abe, so it was a difficult time for her. It was simple and respectful, and we're glad we could be together with her during this tough time. We loved meeting our survivors. We all had some cake, and before we knew it, Ada, Zelda, and Walter were saying their goodbyes. It was such a memorable night, and we are so excited to see them again in a few weeks.
It was so joyful. The reception the kids had, and the question, and the interest, and the emotion. It is very fulfilling for me.
Up until now, we had been learning about the survivors, but this session had a different focus: how to actually conduct an interview with the survivors and to help them tell their stories. We learned how to ask questions that led to meaningful answers, what to do when the story gets complicated, and most of all, how to really listen. Dana Arshin, a 3-time Emmy award-winning journalist who has interviewed more than 150 Holocaust survivors, visited our class to teach us the most useful techniques.
And when you're talking to someone, what makes you feel something is what I want you to elaborate on.
Then she gave an example that stuck with everyone.
Yes, if you see on paper, my family was taken to Auschwitz, you probably think, wow, I want to hear more about that. But there was an interview where he said, my mama made gefilte fish and matzo ball soup. And the way he said it, he hugged his heart and closed his eyes and his big smile on his face as he talked about what his mom made. And right away I was like, oh my goodness, I need to hear more.
That was the moment Dana said the story begins. The moment where you feel something real.
Because remember, they're also humans. They're people. And they're not just survivors. They had lives before the war, they had lives after the war.
From there, Dana shifted into what happens when the story gets confusing, which she told us happens often.
But don't be afraid to say, you know what, I'm lost. Because you're allowed to be lost, it's confusing. There is nothing wrong with saying that.
It felt like we weren't just preparing to interview survivors anymore. We were learning how to listen, how to think, and how to handle these stories with real care.
Wow!
This next session, we celebrated Hanukkah together. Tonight was about spending more quality time with Ada, Zelda, and Walter and bringing some light and joy. We talked, we laughed, we spun dreidels, we shared stories, and we asked a lot of questions. And we had another birthday to celebrate. This time it was Zelda's birthday, and we were so glad to celebrate with her.
Happy birthday to you! Yay!
We each placed paper candles on the wall, spreading light through our own message of love, friendship, and hope. We all lit the menorah together on this third night of Hanukkah. It was special to share this moment together. As we recited Hanukkah prayers, we thought of all the generations of Jewish people who watched Hanukkah flames shine bright, century after century. We loved getting to know Ada, Zelda, and Walter on a more personal level, slowly creating memories with them before we came together in January to record their stories.
Today, we are interviewing Ada Gracin. Ada welcomed us into her home. We sat down together and she began telling us about her life.
Can you tell us your name and birthday?
My name is Ada Gracin, and my birthday is December 8, 1935. I was born in Lodz, Poland. It was cultural, music halls, galleries, art galleries, beautiful parks, beautiful apartment homes.
That normal life didn't last long.
We were 7 out of our apartments, and the Nazis, the Gestapo unit of the Nazi government, came to Lodz. We were ordered to leave our apartments in the middle of the night and rounded up.
Ada's family was forced to run, not knowing where they would end up or if they would ever see each other again.
We began running from the enemy, heading towards a city that my father was at because we were separated, and he ended up in a city called Lvov, which bordered Russia. Mom was told by a messenger who my father sent to Lodz because he was in Lvov to take me and whatever she could carry.
Crossing the border meant facing Nazi soldiers directly.
During our running and confronting Gestapo soldiers at a very dangerous crossing between Poland and Russia, and there was crossfire, and we went through that, encountering a Nazi soldier, and he looked at us and pointed for us to turn back where we came from. My mother began pleading with a German soldier to let us pass. I know that she had my father's watch, gold watch, that she was going to bring to him. She took off her wrist and gave it to him for passage. And he let us go.
Ada and her mom's escape was chaotic and terrifying.
Can you describe your journey through the forest?
You heard voices calling out names because people got separated. It was in the middle of the night. It was very, very scary. Bullets were flying. Every time a bullet flew over our head, my mother would push me down on the ground, cover her body over mine. She said if the bullet hits, she wanted it to hit her before me.
Eventually, they made it to Lvov and met up with Ada's father.
So we were in Lvov, and Lvov was not yet invaded by the Germans. And somehow, my parents were able to secure some false passports or affidavits, and we were able to board cattle cars that carried animals, no windows, and the smell of the animals was overwhelming. My father kept saying, we're heading as far from Poland as we can. And we ended up in a village, namely Kutaisi, Georgia. where my brother was born.
In Georgia, Ada experienced kindness, but life was still very uncertain.
I do remember not being afraid of the neighbors. I do remember the Russians that lived in Georgia and the Georgians were kind. They helped, they provided food when we didn't have food.
Her parents did whatever they could to survive.
In Georgia, my parents had to somehow make money so that they could buy food for us. My father learned how to make sandals, and my mother would go to the black market, they called it, and sell those sandals.
But even there, they were never truly safe.
We were illegal citizens in the country, false passports, and the fear that I had in Georgia was now not the Gestapo or the Nazis, but the Russian secret police. They one day came knocking at our door and they arrested my father.
Help came from an unexpected place.
In the area where we were Russians and Georgians and some former Lubavitcher Hasidim who came to my mother and said, we could get your husband out with a ransom and we're going to collect and you never have to give us back the money.
After that, Ada's family had to face a new reality.
After the release of my dad, we no longer could stay in Kutaisi. So we fled to the capital of Georgia, namely Tbilisi. At that point, my parents said, okay, we're going home, because we did not know what happened to our families. We bought the same cattle cars, incognito, and we had west to Poland.
When they returned to Lodz, nothing was the same.
We go to our old address in Lodz, and the building is rubbish. It's all bombed. The next stop was their former store. My parents owned a lace shop, like curtains, Belgian lace. They went to that address, and a former Polish neighbor was occupying that shop. When she looked at us, she said in Polish, "Psiakrew, the hell with you. I thought Hitler took care of all of you." That was our greeting in Lodz.
They searched for survivors.
In Lodz, we registered with the Jewish authorities, and through the registrars, we realized there was no one of our family listed.
Ada's family knew they couldn't stay in Poland.
My father said to Mom, "We are leaving this blood-soaked country."
Can you share any distinct memories from the displaced persons camp?
How we ended up in Feldafing, which was one of the displaced persons camps. I think I was 8.5. That's when I no longer feared being separated from my mother, my father, my brother.
For Ada, Feldafing felt different.
Life there, I refer to it, life reborn. My mother and parents were determined to have their kids learn, study, music, art, whatever exposure to groom them to recapture what was lost. The teachers that were there imbued us with the future, the hope of Israel. Going there, Anu Banu Arza, we're going to come to our homeland. So, Feldafing is the first time I felt like a child. I had friends. I played with friends, lifelong friends.
But there still was one major problem.
We were still stateless. We didn't have a country, a home.
Eventually, Ada and her family were sponsored to come to America.
From Bremen, Germany, we boarded SS Black. We had to cross what they call the English Channel, which was notorious for turbulent weather. We slept on cots like sardines, head to toe, squashed.
Then they finally arrived.
We came to the New York Harbor, and in the horizon, I remember seeing the Statue of Liberty. And we all got up on the upper deck, crying and laughing and hugging.
Life in America was hard, but it was safe.
We were like boarders. We were not our own apartment. We had a room within someone else's apartment in Brooklyn. We lived in a very poor environment. I didn't feel poor. The important things I had my parents, I had some extended family who really helped us.
Including one very special distant cousin.
She would give Mom her rubbish clothes, and my mother would redesign, recut from that fabric a dress for me.
Going to school in America was tough for Ada.
English was very difficult for me. I stood before a mirror days on to enunciate and to pronounce and to make sure that I sounded American.
Ada eventually built a life of her own.
I went back to school when I was 40. I got my teaching degree. I knew Yiddish from the P camp because that's what I was exposed to. So Hebrew was a natural transition. And I taught at Temple Bethel for 45 years. I wanted to nurture the Jewish kids with all that I had to give. And it felt so good and so natural to teach them how to read Hebrew, to teach them the prayers, and to teach them my history.
Her whole story was very interesting, but I really liked the message that she left us with and about how we should be very proud of ourselves and hopeful and really embrace who we are.
I think it was also incredible that the community was able to raise money to bring her father out of jail. It showed that people cared even in those times for their neighbors and their community.
The minute I met Ada, I just felt a connection towards her, and I'm obsessed with her now, and she's just such a beam of light and sunshine.
The struggles weren't just about the Holocaust itself, but living in a post-Holocaust world where everything you knew is now gone.
Honestly, I just think that it's like super cool that she's able to like vent and like tell the younger generation about exactly what she went through to make sure that like anybody who doesn't know about it gets the knowledge, and then everybody who does know about it never forgets about it.
I think about when she was in, I think, the displaced persons camp, that she described it as life reborn. I can't even imagine like for her how that felt. I guess like her talking about that was just, I guess, like inspiring.
I guess the message that she left us with at the end of the interview was something that I would take away from it, like about how it's always important to, be aware of events and situations, and to always be proud of your heritage and who you are, and not let anybody tell you that it's wrong.
Great seeing you people. Hello. Hello.
Today, we interviewed Walter Kleinmann. He welcomed us into his home on a snowy Sunday. We started by asking Walter where he was born and how his family's story began.
My name is Walter Kleinmann. I was born in the city of Potenza, which is the capital of the province Basilicata. My father was born in Berlin. My mother was born in Poznan, but she moved to Berlin when she was around 10 years old.
Walter explained that his father saw danger coming earlier than most people.
My father was a medical student. In 1933, when he was in his last year of medical school, thugs of German Nazis were beating up on Jewish students at the university. So he decided to leave and go to the University of Pisa. They thought he was nuts because everybody, or most people at that time, thought that Hitler was a passing phenomenon. My father's reaction was, when he passes, I'll be back. And so he decided, with his friends, to go to Italy, and he decided to go into a smaller town where he wouldn't be noticed that much.
Italy felt safer for Walter's father at first, but that changed quickly.
My father, when he got out of medical school, he was declared stateless, and so they drafted him into the Italian army because he didn't have a passport, basically. So he served some 16 months in the Italian army, was discharged, he was a captain. He established a medical practice in Italy. But then in 1938, the racist laws came into effect, so he couldn't practice medicine.
Once the racist laws were enforced, survival meant taking whatever work was available.
So he had odd jobs. One of them was he was a mashgiach, or an overseer, a ritual overseer on a boat. And in 1940, when he came back from one of the trips, he was arrested and sent down to this convent town, Campania, and he spent 6 months there. My mother was arrested on a different occasion, and she was sent to Potenza, and at that time, they were also taking care of an orphan. Her mother had died of natural causes. The father didn't have proper papers to stay in Italy, and so he panicked, and against my dad's advice, decided to go to France, where representatives of the Vichy government picked him up, and he was never heard from again. So my parents, newly married, had an orphan to take care of.
Walter described how Jewish families were slowly stripped of basic rights.
And what was life like in Italy for your parents when the war started?
Everything changed, basically, when the racist laws came into effect, because Jewish children weren't allowed to go to school, public school. Jews could not have large amounts of money or have certain businesses. They couldn't practice certain professions. They were basically being excised out of the society.
Even though Potenza was a city, it was officially treated like a camp.
You're in this town, Potenza, you have restrictions. Your civil liberties have been abrogated, they've been taken away. You have to report to police twice a day. There's a curfew, but you can spend your own money, you can't work, but you can mingle with the people. What do you think the authorities allowed those people to do, those Jews to do right before Passover? They allowed them to bake matzahs in public. This almost surrealistic when you compare what's going on, what went on in other facilities.
Walter wanted us to understand that even though his conditions were different than other camps, the danger never disappeared.
There are some people, some groups in fact, who say, well, you know, you really didn't have it that bad at all, which is true compared to others. But you know, the Germans were on the run, the war was over, there was no danger. The problem was that we, who had been interned in those areas, were subject to the German army coming through. And you don't know what the hell they were going to do. Were they going to take prisoners? Were they going to shoot you? They did in other places.
Walter survived as a baby only because strangers stepped in to help.
And then who were the women who helped nurse you?
There were two women who nursed me. Apparently my father had gotten somebody to nurse me because my mother wasn't able to give of her own milk to me. The two women arranged that I would be fed because I was screaming my head off. I didn't have enough food. I had two milk brothers, one in Potenza, one in Rome, and one milk sister.
Walter shared a moment that could have changed everything.
My mother was staying in the town of Padova, which is in northern Italy, with her best friend. Now her best girlfriend, was dating a non-Jewish person, Catholic obviously. That night she stayed in that person's apartment. They were forewarned that there would be a raid and they would round up Jews. What would have happened had she been in the wrong apartment? I wouldn't have been here today. That's luck.
Walter helped us understand why Jews were sent to southern Italy and how conditions there differed from what most people imagine.
It's agrarian, it's farm country, and it's very poor, which dovetails with what was Mussolini's role and intent in taking all these Jews and bringing them into the South. So when you went to the South, you were poor. You were a farmer, you worked the land, and the intent was that these people would not be able to cause any trouble because they have little money and there's nothing to do down there. So they set up various facilities, also known as concentration camps, but the concentration camps, at least in southern Italy, were different. Not all the camps were of the same nature.
Potenza was officially labeled a concentration camp, but Walter explained his camp was different.
You had larger liberties, you had more liberties in certain facilities, such as where we were. Even though the city was designated as a concentration camp, you can't really say it was a concentration camp based on the average documentary that you see about concentration camp.
Even with those differences, daily life was still extremely hard.
It was a city to which my parents were relegated. They lived in a one-room flat, lice-infested flat with an outhouse. The government, or the church, or both, gave them 4 lira a day for a level of subsistence. They supported them, in other words. They did not have to wear a Jewish star. They were not humiliated in public by the citizens. They didn't have to scrub streets. They weren't beaten, and they were not put behind bars.
Walter described a moment that would not have happened in camps in other places in Europe.
When my father first went to Campania, before he even got to the convent, he was put into a cell, and luckily that he got out. He was put in a cell with 2 other doctors, and they had malaria. And so he begged them to let him out of the cell because everybody was getting malaria. The authorities, the people who put him into the cell, actually sent him to a center outside of Campania to get better. So they medically saved his life. No such thing happened in the average concentration camp in Europe.
Walter read to us a memoir written by his mother.
We had very hard times, but it was Hashem's will that we survived, but not without the help of the friendly and good Italians who helped us with food and advice, and they were poor like us.
After the war ended, life slowly began to stabilize for Walter's family.
I remember, though, going to school in the city of Milan. I spent a whole year in Milan. I still have my report card from Milan. Of course, I went to public school, but of course I had Catholic religious instruction because all the school had it, especially after the war. And also during the war, when I went, right after the war in the city of Potenza. My first religious instruction was Catholic school instruction right in the church.
One unexpected meeting changed Walter's family's future.
Well, after the war, we lived partially a couple of years in Potenza, and then we went to Milan. My father was in charge of the Joint Distribution Committee, and his main office was in Genoa. So one day, my father gets an invitation to go up by train to Lausanne, Switzerland. Who is this person? Well, it's Ada Grac's daughter, the watchmaker, international watchmaker, and also philanthropist. And the result of that meeting was they thought my father was a very honorable man, and they sent him, Ada Gracin sends him, either 100 or 120 blank affidavits. So my father was insulted because he tells me, I thought this was a joke being played on me by somebody. I do serious work. So he checked with his contact at the American Embassy, and they told him, Doc, all you got to do is put somebody's name on, and you're going to the States. And that's how we got to the States.
Walter arrived in New York as a child.
When you came to the U.S., who came with you and where did you go?
We came as a family, my mother, my father, my brother Erwin, and myself. And my brother Howard was born later, 1949. First we were lodged in a hotel, the Hotel Marseille, at 103rd Street. And then we had what I call the magnificent, luxurious quarters of 132 Orchard Street. It had electricity, so it was the more modern building, built after 1900.
The Lower East Side became home for Walter.
You stayed in the house, but I went to school. I walked to school, to PS 160 on Norfolk and Suffolk Street. And in junior high school, I spent a half year in junior high school. I walked from Orchard Street all the way to Chinatown. I walked through Hester Street, crossed the Lancey by myself, made my way. In those days, you didn't worry about being kidnapped, anything happening to you. If you had a problem, you went into a store. They helped you out.
Walter grew up in a neighborhood where everyone came from somewhere else.
When I came to the States, I came during what I call the Great Puerto Rican Influx, 1948 to 52. I went to school with a lot of kids who didn't speak English. They spoke Spanish. They came from Puerto Rico. And I was pretty comfortable. I spoke Italian, they spoke Spanish. We got along great. It was the Lower East Side, the melting pot.
School wasn't always easy for Walter.
I couldn't express myself in writing as well as other students. There was a language problem. You know, I first had to learn English. Some kids make fun of me because of my name and my looks. They thought I was German. The Germans didn't have a very good reputation in the States. That was another factor. So English was difficult, but I was pretty good in school, and I got over it. So I went to foreign languages instead.
Languages became Walter's passion and career.
I went to college. I was a student at Queens College. I went away from the sciences. I wound up majoring in German, surprise, and I wanted to become a teacher. I always kept up with the Italian, or tried to, and then I went into other languages after I graduated.
What do you do to ensure that your story is remembered, you and your family's story is passed down?
Well, programs such as these are going to ensure that it will be remembered, but we need to keep the Holocaust alive and make it known what occurred, because there are similar events taking place with other ethnic groups throughout the world.
Walter ended by telling us why he continues to share his story.
I'm very proud that I was born in Italy. I could have been part of those corpses, unidentified corpses, but these people, in many ways, helped to survive. I could have gotten pneumonia, I could have gotten an illness, I could have died, any one thing, I could have starved to death. So my job is to tell the story. I do it because I think it keeps the memory alive of my grandparents and my story, and it maybe douses a little bit of water on the deniers.
I thought it was amazing that he could see like such brightness in such a dark time for himself, and that he has like the courage and the want to share that with more people.
I thought it was interesting the people who helped him, like the two Catholic women who helped nurse him and raise him, and shows people stood up during the Holocaust and helped each other out.
It really resonated with me how, like, the impact he said the Holocaust had on religion. So how, like, hard events like that can kind of alter the way you celebrate culture, how, like, and how you're, like, it connects you with your family. That really resonated with me.
I found it really interesting how he was still able to reconnect with his milk siblings, like, so many years after the war.
I thought it was kind of interesting when he talked about the Milk brothers, how it was almost a second family, how they were really like, they referred to him as just like they were brothers almost, and I thought that was kind of interesting.
What he said at the end in Italian, that the man who like treads slowly reaches his goal, I think that's one thing that I'm going to take away from the whole interview, because I think it's a good piece of advice to live life by.
Usually when you hear Holocaust stories, they come from countries like Germany, Poland, even Russia. But Walter's story takes place, some of it in Italy, which you don't really see that often, and it's definitely a unique perspective on a story that you already know.
Thank you so much for sharing these stories. I hope to pass them down and make sure that they spread awareness.
We arrived at Zelda's house knowing she was a Holocaust survivor, but we didn't know about the horrific details of her childhood.
My name is Zelda Polofsky. I was born in Droysk. I had one sister that we survived together. Before the war, it was very good. I was like 8 years old when Hitler came to us. But we started hearing that they are keeping Jews in the ghettos to transport them to Auschwitz. We were supposed to go to the Vilna ghetto, but the Vilna was so far away from us, like 200 kilometers from Droysk.
Zelda and her family had to make a plan to stay closer to home.
So we decided we'll smuggle ourselves into a small ghetto, which was 7 kilometers from us.
The Nazis demanded whatever they wanted, and Zelda's family had no choice but to give it all.
They came to the Kehila because the Kehila knew our names and how much money we had. So the Kehila, they wanted a certain amount of gold and diamonds.
Zelda's family soon learned that being nice wouldn't protect them from the Nazis.
The Nazis came in from the Breslova ghetto into Droysk, where my town was. We will welcome them because we thought that we'll be nice to them, maybe they'll be nice to us.
Did you witness anything that you remember today?
I remember that one of the Nazis took out a pistol and shot into our group. And it's in a way of saying, now you have to listen to us, and there is no way that you can be individuals. And it hit a man who was standing next to me, and at the end of the day, he died.
Zelda and her family had to keep moving to stay alive.
So we left with my mother and my sister without my father, but then my father found us and we went to Breslov.
Zelda said everyone knew this ghetto was just a stop on the way to something worse.
People were sad because they knew that it's a holding place.
Zelda's ghetto was different than most ghettos.
The ghetto didn't have a wall like the Warsaw Ghetto. Our ghetto was a lake around the ghetto, and I guess the Nazis felt that we can't escape.
Zelda told us that one day when she went to the lake, she noticed there were no people with guns, and that meant only one thing.
I saw that it was different. And I woke up my mother, and she woke up my father, and we started running. We heard they decided to kill the ghetto itself. So as we were in the center of ghetto, we started running towards the hiding place.
Zelda and her family had a basement to hide in, but it soon became crowded with others seeking safety.
Tell me about your hiding place in the ghetto.
The hiding place was in a basement in the ghetto itself. When we started running to the hiding place, so many people figured that we have a hiding place, so they would join us. There were more people than there was food in the hiding place. People came in with small children. One of our cousins had a child that we couldn't keep him quiet. And he kept on crying, and everybody knew that they would find out that we have a hiding place in the ghetto. So the father himself choked his child.
Sadly, this wouldn't be the last time Zelda witnessed a baby silenced like this.
It was very traumatic. There was so much killing around us. And I was able to see behind the stones towards what's happening to our people.
Hiding was terrifying. Zelda could see the violence outside, and the fear inside was just as real.
They came in the morning, they came with guns. They stuck the guns and they said, if you don't go out, we'll shoot right in. And then we had to go out.
Even though Zelda's family had to leave the hiding place, their careful planning helped them survive.
So I remember my sister holding onto to my mother's leg, and she was hysterical because we figured that we'll be shot there when we'll come out. But they didn't shoot us. We had our gold and diamonds, whatever we had, valuable stuff. My father had it in his pocket. So he must have paid them off, and they let us leave.
Zelda's father found other safe places for them to hide, moving them from house to house and farm to farm. One farmer agreed to hide Zelda and her family, even though it could have gotten him killed. Letting them stay meant risking not just his life, but his family's lives too.
He let us up in the attic. And if we were found in his house, his fate would be our fate. He would be killed if he was helping Jews. He couldn't keep us all the time, so we would find another farmer to help us.
Zelda's family had already survived the ghetto, cold winters, and constant fear, but the suffering continued. Zelda's mother became very sick at the farm, and without enough food and no medical care, she passed away. At just 8 years old, Zelda had to keep moving, keep hiding, and keep surviving without her mother. The end of the war finally came in early 1945, but the fear remained for Zelda's family.
So we figured that we're liberated, and that was the most beautiful time for us. So we attached to the Russian army, and they gave us something to eat. We kept on going with the army. They wanted to get rid of us, but we wouldn't go.
Even after the war, Zelda and her sister weren't completely free. They were arrested once just for trying to cross a border and warned that next time it could be much worse.
We were caught, and we were put in jail for 2 weeks. We kept in jail. And they said, if we try to cross the border, next time we will go to jail for a long time. But we crossed the border.
After the war, Zelda's family went back to their hometown, hoping to find what was left of their life.
What did you see when you went back to your hometown?
Our home was taken apart. My parents put in the walls their money, so it was taken apart completely. So we went to the grandparents' home, but it was occupied by the Poles. And they said, "Hey, you survived? We'll kill you. If you don't leave, we'll do away with you."
They had no choice but to start over in a displaced persons camp where Zelda finally got a chance to go to school and learn.
All the teachers that survived taught the children that survived. It was heaven to me because I was going to school and there were a lot of children. So we stayed there for 3.5 years, waiting for a visa to come to the United States.
After years of unimaginable loss, fear, and uncertainty, Zelda finally got on a ship to the United States. The journey was rough, but for the first time she could see a real chance at a new life in Minnesota.
I was 16 when I came to the United States. They put me in the 9th grade in St. Paul, Humboldt High School, but I didn't know a word of English, but there was a little girl that knew Yiddish, and she would explain to me all that the teacher said. And by the 10th grade, it was sink or swim, and that is, I learned English by the 10th grade.
After everything she went through, Zelda dedicated her life to teaching.
What was your last job?
My last job was teaching at Manhattan Hill Jewish Center for 40 years. And I had a lot of children, bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah.
Zelda told us why she speaks out. She wants us to know the truth, to understand the lives that were lost, and to carry the memory of those who were not able to tell their story themselves.
1.5 million children were lost in the Holocaust. I speak for the children who can't speak.
When she told us how the people who were in her town after she came back from the camp, they still didn't want her there, that just showed me how that the Jews were never safe at that time and they were always being targeted by someone.
Some of her story was her daughter's first time hearing it was today. So I thought that was very interesting to hear that it was our first time hearing it, but also hers.
Like that she never lost her faith in Judaism and in God. That she's always been open to speaking about the Holocaust, to share her story and so that people don't forget about it.
The stuff that we take for granted now was so important to them because they didn't have it. We're not used to not having safety and just things that we need in general.
When she was talking about her life in hiding, I think it's really hard to comprehend something like that, especially since it was so long ago. Even when you learn about it in school, it just seems rushed and unbelievable, but when you hear it from an actual survivor, your comprehension of it comes very different.
I found it so heartwarming that she was so excited to tell her story, and that what she loves to do is tell her story. Even though it took a toll on her and created the person she is today, she still loves to share who she is with anybody.
I think the most impactful part was all of the people who weren't Jewish who helped her family survive.
When she talked about how one of the parents had to silence their baby, it really touched my heart and made me feel how the Holocaust had such an impact on people and made people's lives so terrible.
Young people are the future of the world, and they need to make sure that it will never become that extreme.
I think it's important because we're the last generation to be able to actually talk to them. We're the ones that are going to be responsible for passing the stories on.
Because it's such an important time period. I think that we really need to keep these stories alive and pass them down to make sure they don't die.
And Jewish young people, they should continue to share the story and make sure that something like that never happens again.
I think it's really important to spread awareness about the Holocaust just to make sure it never happens again and to stop anything before it does become big.
Great learning experience to do this. It's a first-hand source. You're not going to get it from anything else. The most true story that you can get.
It's one of the biggest genocides in the world that happened, and especially right now I feel that a lot of people should learn about the Holocaust because there's a lot of anti-Semitism happening right now. So that this never happens again, and that everyone should hear the story whether or not they're Jewish or not.
To actually speak to people and understand things firsthand is so much more important, and it makes it that much easier to actually make peace tangible.
There's not a lot of survivors left, and I just think it's important because we're the last generation that will get to hear them and see them.
It should never happen again, and people should never forget, especially with the rising anti-Semitism. They should be well educated on what's going on and how they can take preventive measures to make sure it never happens again.
Especially now there's a rise in anti-Semitism, so we need to keep these stories being heard.
If you don't learn history, it will happen again. And for young people to know, once the survivors are not alive or not able to tell their stories anymore, you need the younger generations to be able to keep their stories alive.
It should always be remembered so it doesn't happen again.
Well, there's a lot, aside from anti-Semitism, there's a lot of other hate against religions and cultures, so it's really important for history not to repeat itself.
All these people that had to go through these hard times, they feel heard and understood more so that they don't feel like they're just struggling with the past.
You can keep her legacy and her story alive and educate as many people as you can on what you learned.
It gives people a better understanding that, oh, this isn't just some thing that happened 80-something years ago, but these were real people who went through this and real lives were lost.
Recently, with growing anti-Semitism, it's looking like something like this could happen to
not just Jews, but anyone, which scares me.
The best way for something like the Holocaust to never happen again is for people to share the stories.
It like keeps the story alive so people don't forget it or ignore it. By telling the stories, you're honoring those people's stories like Walter's.
Young people and the next generation have to make sure that something like that doesn't occur again, and we need to raise awareness about what could happen if something like that were to happen.
Just be kind to everyone. Doesn't matter where they came from, what they do, just be kind.
People who do the right thing regardless of their background when they need to do the right thing is what we need in this world. We have more people who do that, then the world wouldn't be that bad.
Because you're my future. I believe in you. I believe you have to be proud of who you are and continue that journey. Don't shy away.
The Holocaust should never be forgotten. To young children, it's like ancient history. And that's what I speak